So, guys, today is another episode for Defender's Voice, and we have very special friends in the studio. We also have Nehemiah, who's producing it today, first day. So it's going to be amazing, and going forward, I think that he's probably going to be around and help us build it. So today we have Mike and Rachel. They're our neighbors. They're our very good friends, and we've known them for roughly about a year or so, and they've been just awesome to get to know, to hang out with, and our children.
Likewise.
Our children spend a lot of time together, and they're just literally next door neighbor. Your new puppy's here, and
yes, I love
their
it.
kids and your kids are hanging out right now, and my wife, and so we get to sneak out here and do this bit of a recording. So I'm just gonna hand it off to you, Mike, and let's talk about faith, life, liberty, and everything else under the sun.
Everything under the sun. Well, I don't know if we have enough time for everything under the sun, but I will keep it short though. Okay, so obviously those who don't know me, I'm Michael, and my beautiful and talented and wonderful, just my everything, the better half, Rachel. I know. She's a little nervous, so guys, give her some slack here. But as far as who we are, we are a product of coming up on 12 years of one crazy adventure, really. God has brought us through some very highs and some very lows and everything in between.
Yeah.
And
changes, a lot of refinement.
Yeah. A lot of refinement through fire, for sure. Yeah. But so we've been married for 12 years now, and we have 3 kids, 3 wonderful kids, 2 boys and a younger daughter, my baby girl. Mm-hmm. And it all started, I was in Iraq, and it's a 2-week break. So typically during deployments, you get time off.
Yeah.
Just kind of refresh, because obviously, war is hard. And during those 2 weeks, I actually had to switch some plans up because I wasn't actually supposed to go to St. Louis first. I went to Texas first.
And St. Louis is where you're from?
Yes, yeah.
Is that where you grew up?
Yes and no.
St. Louis?
Yeah, so I actually grew up out in west of St. Louis, out in the sticks. And then towards like middle school, high school, like we moved out towards St. Louis. So anyways, but because
this was back when they did year-long deployments. So we
had long deployments back then. Yeah.
Well, let's back up a little bit more. How did you guys meet?
Well, that's where we're getting to. Yeah. So this is where it gets interesting. Okay. Because we had actually sandstorms at the time. I had to switch around my plans to go home. Okay. And thank God for sandstorms, right? I didn't think that at the time because I'm just like, I just want to go home. Like, I'm tired of eating dirt all day. And so I woke up one morning and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do a favor for my father. I'm going to go change his oil. And I went to Jiffy Lube that morning. It was 7:00 in the morning. And lo and behold, this beautiful woman was sitting there. And I was like, well, I'm going to strike up a conversation. Mind you, though, I wasn't really thinking about a girlfriend or a wife or anything of the sorts because I ended up breaking up with my fiance before the deployment. Let's just say that was not right for me, and thank God. I had the wits about me to run from that situation. But anyway, so that was a crazy story in its own. So we struck up a conversation, and she was like, how are you doing? Or something like, I don't remember the exact words.
I think you said it first. I was going to say something because I could feel you looking at me. I had a magazine in front of me, and he was like, we're the only 2 people in the waiting room getting our oil changed. I could feel him looking at me, and I was like, maybe I should talk to him. Seems like a nice guy. And I opened my mouth to say something, and he spoke first. And he was like, so how are you doing today? And like, oh, good. And we just kind of started talking. And
Oh,
I was
I
like,
remember.
how are you?
You asked, yeah.
And he said,
That's right.
I'm great. I'm on vacation. I was like,
Who
in
vacations
St. Louis?
in St. Louis?
Why?
I was like, well, actually, I'm vacationing from Iraq, know, and that kind of just started the ball, as far as getting to know one another. And long story short, she was actually in chiropractic school at the time, just graduated.
I graduated a few months earlier. I was kind of trying to see if I could stay in the area because I didn't really want to move back to Chicago where I was from.
So that's where you grew up?
Yes.
Okay.
And I wasn't too excited about the idea of going back and wasn't really finding much of a life in St. Louis, though, either. So I was actually there getting my car ready to move back because I was like, this isn't working out.
But you were in St. Louis for school? Just purely school?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was there for a little over almost 6 years, I think, 5.5, something like that.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is we lived in the same apartment complex.
At one point,
did not
so
know.
flashback many years before we actually met for the first time, I had just joined the military and I was in the reserves, and I was still going to post every day though because I was on orders doing some other side work. Even though you're in the reserves, you can do full-time work. Okay. And so, but I would do PT, running, things like that in the morning before I'd go to work. And I remember it was dead of winter. I'm out there in shorts and t-shirt and going for a run. And I walked past this girl who's just going at it with this pick on the ice and just this miserable, mad look on her face. And then I was like, well, it sucks for her, And I waved at her and she just, whatever, didn't think much of it. And she had seen my motorcycle before. So we had seen one another before. Okay. And there were actually moments where I was probably changing her oil because I actually worked at the same Jiffy Lube when I was in high school. And so she was in college at the time and would bring her car there. So I was interacting with her without even knowing about it. And so we lived literally right next to each other for years and didn't really know about it. So I was actually living in Texas at the time when technically Iraq, but my residence was Texas because I already had been gone for years at this point from St. Louis. And so we struck up this conversation. Long story short, we were kind of blessed with the situation because she was able to go back to Chicago. I went back to Iraq, and during that time, we were able to get to know each other.
Mm-hmm. No, wait a minute.
Oh, what am I missing? Sorry.
The part where the conversation did not end. Because my car was done. Yes. My car was done first. And we were in the middle of this conversation, and I was like, I'm kind of enjoying this, Yeah. And the manager comes up, and he's like, all right, you're all finished. And
who was
Mike,
which I'll never forget because he's my manager. My manager, and we hated each other. We did.
So I go to pay at the counter, and then I come back to him, and I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get to continue the conversation. And I was like, well, it was nice meeting you. I hope you enjoy your time here. Good luck in Iraq. Thanks for your service. All the typical stuff, Yeah. And then I turn around to walk away, and I'm walking through the door, and I just, something literally stopped me from moving any further. The door was half open, and I just stopped completely in my tracks. And I heard this voice in my head that said, you're probably walking away from your future husband right now. Oh, wow. Turn around and give him your number. And so I went back to the desk, and I was like, you know what? And I grabbed the card.
Well, no, Mike Mike, the manager, had written, of course, he's hitting on her. She's beautiful. I mean, come on. And so he was like, put his personal number on the face of it and was like, hey, if you call me if you ever need any help with your car. Yeah. And so
I flipped it over. I wrote my name and number on the back. Yeah. And I walked up to him and I gave it to him. I said, if you're bored while you're here, I'll be here for about another week. Maybe we could hang out, get lunch or something like that. And he's like,
cool.
All right. I will call you.
And of course she left and Mike was just looking at me with such resentment because he knew, you best me. Wow.
Wow.
But anyways, yeah. So
He'd been flirting with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was it. He called me that day, and we made a date for 2 days later. That was Monday when we met. We made the date for Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. It was perfect timing. I was actually kind of dating somebody at the time, but we both knew that we were at the end of this because I was leaving, and it wasn't. We just weren't that serious about each other, and so I think we were supposed to see each other that night, and so I had nothing. He was, looking. I was kind of whatever. We were free, and I had made the date with him and went out with the other guy that night, and then knowing that eventually this is coming to an end within the next few days, we were going to officially knock it off, and he told me that night that he had already moved on, and I was like,
wow,
perfect.
All right, well, so 2 nights later, it's time for our date. It's about 2 hours beforehand.
Yes.
And I'm like, you know what? This guy, he better call me and make sure we're still going out, because I am not going to waste my time getting ready just to sit here all by my lonesome self. And about 5 minutes later, he called me, and he's like, just making sure you still wanted to go out with me. And I was like,
wow.
Yeah.
Is this dude reading my mind or something? It's like the third time something weird has happened. Because, the first time was when you spoke before I did. And then God told me to come give you my number. I feel very strongly that must have been divine intervention. And the timing was so perfect, and then he heard me say that somehow.
Well, which is funny because I never actually said anything to her about this until now. But I just remember sitting at my apartment, and the card was sitting on the countertop, and I was like, I need to call her to make sure that we're still good, because I don't want to get my hopes up.
Yeah,
and so I went to pick her up. And of course, I was stunned, blown away, and
it was a great reaction. I've never actually had that reaction from anybody who came to pick me up from a date before I got ready, and he knocks on the door. I open it up, and he literally stepped back and was like, "Hi."
I was a little blown away.
Is that
made me feel
looks like you're
special.
still blown away?
Oh yeah. I all the time, and I tell all the time too. I'm like, man, I am such a lucky dude.
Yeah,
he does tell me.
Yeah, blessed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, switching gears a little bit, going back, what was like growing up, and I want to hear more about growing up, parents, siblings. Faith, when did that enter the thought of, you both mentioned God, right?
Yeah.
Where did that come in? When it became solid in your life, like a center line?
Yeah. Well, I've already kind of, spoken about this topic, so I'll just kind of summarize for folks that don't know. I grew up in a supposed Christian home, and God was kind of in the background the whole time. And pretty much once we had gotten to high school, God was out of the picture. I was on my own. I wanted to figure out my own way. And I don't want to say God wasn't completely gone, but he definitely wasn't present. And I went to war, and I kind of found God again, exploring what is truth, how do I reconcile all these problems, life, death, suffering, but when that happened, it was right around the same time that I met her. So, we can talk more about that going forward once she shares her side of the story. But once I started finding truth, searching for truth, I should say, and finding it, that's kind of like when I met her. And then our life kind of really started from that moment. Yeah. Coming back to God. But I'll let her speak on her life story a little bit.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of just go from there.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Sounds good.
So I did grow up in a Christian home, but we had stopped going. My entire family went to the same church when I was young, and then we stopped going to church. I think I was back maybe 7 or 8, and we all left the church at the same time and started doing kind of like our own home church stuff with just the family, the immediate family. And after a while, that kind of faded out too, as all of us kids got older, and we just kind of wanted to do our own thing, and it just sort of faded into the background a little bit. And however, we always had a very strong faith in prayer. I grew up with that faith instilled in me. I witnessed miracles through prayer, and so I never doubted God. I never doubted Jesus. I never doubted any of that. But I did go through a long process of questioning. I think it started probably when I was about 14. And I was tired of being the only good girl that I knew. You know what I mean?
In Chicago.
I had been going to a youth group on my own with some of my friends, and I think, as what happens with a lot of people, things kind of fell apart there too. I stopped going there. And so then my constant influences were removed from my life. And I was very hurt and disappointed. And I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm just gonna do me. I'm gonna do whatever I want. We'll see how this goes. And worst thing that happens, I'll have some experiences to share later on, right? And that's what I did for a good decade or more. Was not living a Christian lifestyle at all whatsoever. And partying and drinking and experimenting with a lot of different things and guys and whatever. And you know what? At first, it's fun. You don't really see the harm in it. It's whatever. This is great. This is fun. And it takes time for it to really start eating away at you. Yeah. And it did. It was, things just started to get really dark in my life, and lonely and ugly, and the pattern just continued. I always had something or someone to escape to. Never truly learned how to deal with the things I was feeling, the questions I had, the hurt, found myself in some awful relationships. And on paper, I looked great. Like, my resume was fantastic. None of this stuff ever affected my schooling. I had high education, several degrees. Like, it all looked good. I had the experience, but my personal life was an absolute disaster. I was just really good at hiding it for as long as I needed to. You know?
Yeah, you were a shiny turd.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
You were a shiny turd.
Yeah, and so and that guy that I was dating right before him, wasn't any better of a situation. And actually, right before I met him, I was just like, you know what, forget it. I'm done. I'm gonna focus on my career. I'm gonna get rich. And when I'm 40, I'll adopt a baby all by myself. Forget it. Forget men. I'm done. This is stupid. Yep. I'm obviously not good at this.
So definitely you can see some of the feminist...
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Strong feminist tendencies.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, which actually came into play in our marriage.
Oh, big time.
Big time. So, yeah, we'll touch on that a little bit later.
Okay.
And, yeah. Marriage and kids was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Go figure.
Specifically marriage to him. Like, God knew what he was doing when he told me to stop. Because together we have walked that journey back to God. Yeah. And he's slowly chipped away all of that. And I have completely done a 180 with my perspective on everything, my beliefs on everything.
Really?
If that doesn't say it all.
Well, I am sort of guilty of that, even though I was not a citizen. I did recommend to everybody in 2008 to vote for him.
I can't be friends with any of you.
Yeah, that's what I did. I told many of my friends, and I know who were some of my friends from church who were influenced by what I observed as an outsider to do this, and they did, and I'm still guilty of it. In fact, I apologize for those mistakes.
Well, good. Thank you.
And so that was 2008. Again, I was new in the country, so I can completely relate. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. No, and I was a different personality. I was a tough one. I was stubborn and opinionated, and I yelled a lot.
Which is funny because it's everything that's contrary to everything that I ever wanted in a wife. Yeah. Like, hey, thank God I didn't know my wife completely. Because I would have said no, to be honest with you, because it's everything that was contrary to what I wanted in a woman, right? And which is funny, like, God took a back seat, but at the same time, I was like, I need a woman who believes in God and can take care of kids and cook and clean, which, is nice and all, but it was definitely a flawed belief because now, obviously, like, those things are good, but,
that's not really foundational things, in other words, like for marriage.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say our foundation was good. I mean, looked at it as, what do you call it, misogynistic. Yeah. I believed in God,
Yeah.
I think that our early conversations where we found a lot of common ground.
Yes. Yeah. And so when we were in Iraq, like, we corresponded all the time via email and occasionally what was that? What was that one program back in the day? Skype. I'm not sure if it's still around.
It's still around.
Oh, it is? People still use Skype?
People still use it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't know. I'm not a technology guy.
Microsoft has kept that alive, but it was a Swedish company, I think.
Oh,
originally.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, we Skyped and we emailed and we wrote letters. And I actually still have this wonderful little Christmas tree she sent me. It was like maybe like 12 inches or something like that tall. And had little miniature, ornaments. And which is kind of funny. That reminds me. I'm not sure if you remember when we were talking around Christmas Day, you had sent that and I opened it and I got it just in the nick of time. Right. And we were talking on Skype, I think it was. And they started shooting like rockets and mortars on Christmas Day. And it was to be expected. Holidays, they always, try to do something to us. And like mortars start coming in and it gets closer and closer. And I was like, oh, I gotta go, And I disappeared for a minute, and you were a little bit worried. I'm not sure if you remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. But that one actually ended up like landing right next to my chew, and like lighting that on fire. So I was kind of glad I left. But yeah. So
it's interesting. We had 6 months to get to know each other real well before he came back. Without that, without the physical and
temptations in the way.
And so when you came back, like, we had already pretty much planned. I think we both knew already. Yeah. We were gonna be together.
Well, I actually knew that I wanted to marry her, like that week that we first had met, because we went to the Save-A-Lot. I think it was.
I don't know what it was.
It was Save-A-Lot because we weren't rich. Anymore. We were poor. And we didn't have the money to go to Schnucks, the fancy one.
I don't know what those are.
It's okay. It's in St. Louis.
I think some of them are closed now. But.
Yeah, so we went to Save-A-Lot or something like that, and she was making me an Italian dinner. And I was like, this is cool. Like, I love this. This woman's making me dinner. I've never had a woman who made me a dinner before. Like, I can get used to this. And she was shopping for cheese, and I was like kind of standing off to the side a little bit, giving her space. I didn't want to be too overbearing, trying to play it cool. Outside I was freaking out. But she was looking at cheese, and I was like, I can totally buy cheese with this woman for the rest of my life. Like, I'm gonna do this one of these days. I'm gonna marry this woman, and that I will never forget the day I actually fell in love with this woman. And but after I had gotten back on Valentine's Day 2011,
you came straight to Chicago.
And
where I was.
I will say that was I was more terrified the day I got there than I did all of war. Like, her Aunt Cheryl, God bless her. I love you. If you're listening, I love you. But you drive like it's the apocalypse is chasing you. Like, it was so terrifying. I was like, I survived war, but now I'm gonna die on the expressways in Chicago.
Oh my goodness.
But anyways, so I went back to Chicago, and got to meet the family, and it was a good experience, And I haven't really been back since, but whatever.
I know you mentioned you have a sister, and do you have other siblings?
Yes, okay. I got a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many siblings do you have?
4 blood, and then a couple unofficial adopted.
Okay.
That we brought in during high school, and our family's big, and then of course we have all the nephews and nieces nephews, yeah.
And a niece.
Oh, and a niece. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. New niece.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brand new.
Yeah, that's right. And so the one thing about my family though is we were family centered. We were always there for one another, but obviously things kind of fell apart towards the end of high school, and we all went our ways, and things are a little bit different now, but back then family was important. And that's why I knew, like, when we got married, I wanted to have kids and have a big family and eventually adopt. But anyways, so.
What about you, Rachel? Do you have siblings?
I'm an only child.
Oh, okay.
That made things interesting for a little while.
It did.
It still makes things interesting sometimes.
Because I was used to sharing all my space. Like, we were living in a 3-bedroom apartment with 7 people. At one point, we had close to 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because of all the various people that my mom brought in, And so I was used to, like, having no space and no stuff. Whereas
I wouldn't say I was spoiled, but I had my space,
Yeah.
And I got used to my alone time and all of that, and being able to eat my own food.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say neither of you is like introvert or anything like that. You both are mostly extroverted. Is that correct?
I give off a very wonderful lie.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm actually very much a introvert. I prefer being alone. Yeah. I do. Yeah.
Wow.
News to me.
That's not true. That is not true.
Hey, you definitely enjoy hanging out here, as I enjoy your company. So
well, thank you.
At least that's good.
I'm very select though when it comes to who I hang out with and who I give my time to. Yeah. So you count yourself lucky.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of, Nehemiah here. You have 8 different siblings.
Oh, that's right.
9 siblings.
Yeah.
Right. So that's something that we love, that family that we love. So I know that, and we are 3. Yeah. So I totally get that. I don't know the only child part.
Only child. Yeah.
Yeah. Which definitely came into play.
Even
with
when I had roommates, I still had my own room. Everybody knew I needed my own room.
Don't touch.
So it was interesting, and it still is.
Yeah, you guys got married after you came back.
Yes.
Chicago was first stop. When did you propose to her then?
In Texas. I moved down to Texas.
Okay. She closed up shop. She had her own practice there. Yeah. And she moved down in May,
I think.
That's right.
To Austin.
So I was living in Texas. She was living in Chicago. And then she's like, all right, I'm moving down. Yeah. I said, cool.
So we got married as fast as we could.
Yeah.
Yep.
And our anniversary is tomorrow, actually.
Yeah.
And it was kind of
It was fast.
It was fast, and it was a whirlwind, and then the same year, 9 months after we got married, I had our first.
Okay. All right.
And we barely had time to adjust to even being together.
Yeah.
Before the baby came along and changed everything.
Yep. Oh, and on top of that, you became an Army wife.
Yes. So I gave up the work.
Yep.
And all of that, because it was kind of impossible to do all that.
Well, first, congratulations and happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So that's been 12 years?
Yep.
Yes.
That's awesome. Okay, well, you guys got married a little after us, I guess, 2 years after.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You've been married 14 now in May.
Oh, awesome.
Wonderful.
So, awesome. Well, next set of questions, which is, I want to talk about where you guys moved around, church experience, dive into any subjects that you're passionate about as you discuss the most at home. Obviously, we do talk quite a bit of politics between us, of course. Then, of course, we are going to the same church, and we share a lot of things. Land-wise is walking over and all that sort of thing. You're right next door. We never had anything like that. Aaron and I never had. I mean, we had neighbors, but not that we were that close to, and so on. So, what's that like? Take us from there to here now.
Why don't you talk about that, baby?
Oh, okay. I'll give the synopsis. So, after baby was born, we ended up going to Fort Bragg. I'm always going to call it Fort Bragg. I don't care.
Oh, yeah. They
North
named
Carolina.
it because it's now politically incorrect to name it after a Confederate general.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
Yeah, they changed the
I'm
name.
still referring to it the same way.
North Carolina.
We lived
So
there.
we will not ever pronounce that new name. We're just going to.
It's always Fort Bragg.
Sticking with the original.
Okay.
That's how we
Original.
knew it, and that's how it is always going
Right
to be to
on.
me. We were there for 6 years in North Carolina, and that's where I had second baby 2 years later,
right.
which also coincided with a major move. We moved into the first house that we ever bought exactly 1 week before our second boy was born, and
That was incredibly stressful.
it was very stressful. So first we moved a month after the first was born, halfway across the country, and then moved into the house, and then he was born. And so literally every time we've moved, had a major move, there's been a baby accompanying.
9 months later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a church in Texas that we loved, and
Yep,
couldn't
shout out
wait
to
to get back
Whitestone Church in Lakeway,
Yes.
Texas. I love them.
Yes,
If you
love
can look
them.
him up, the pastor is amazing. He's a wonderful.
it's a non-denominational church.
Yeah.
And they are just passionate. And
They actually were one of the reasons why we came back to God.
Yes.
Because they were a gospel preaching, not just a preaching church, but they did wow.
they were worshiping, and they had a history of their own. The pastor and his wife
Yeah.
had stories.
Yeah.
They had a past, and they were not afraid to share it. And
They
it
were the
was
hands and feet of
a
Christ.
wonderful testimony to the rest of us, and
So
just the passion in that place. And it's still a small place.
yeah, the numbers
And-
haven't changed, but that's okay because they do far more in that small church than a lot of churches across this country, unfortunately.
Yeah. So they were a big part of our kind of transformation.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things that I kind of had to work through with my past, regrets and some shame and stuff like that I started to kind of get some release from when we went there.
Yeah. And to anybody who thinks that, your past is in the past, like it's not true. Like it can change your perspective on your marriage, and it can change your perspective on your children, and create boundaries, some very difficult boundaries to cross
Walls,
when trying to grow in your marriage. We in hindsight we look back and we realize that there was a lot of things in her life and in my life that affected the way we loved each other and served one another.
Yeah.
And it actually restricted our abilities to be completely open and honest and transparent about what we think and what we feel, or even our sin in our life and our struggles. Yeah.
So that was the beginning of that long process. Then we had to go to North Carolina, and we never did really find a church there.
No.
So for 6 years we were just kind of winging it.
We were hopping church to
meantime,
church.
Our both sets of our parents got divorced
Oh yeah.
within a few years of our marriage.
Wow.
And both are married for 28, 30.
My parents were 35
Yeah.
years, I think. Yours were like 25, something like that. So,
28 or 29.
So
something
we're
like that,
navigating through all this stuff, and we know this is not a good time to ask them for advice. Okay,
and we're
they were going
struggling
through their own
hard.
things, and our struggles we just kind of handled on our own.
Yeah.
And we don't have to go into too many details, but we we fell hard. We fell on our faces, and we kind of came to a literal come to Jesus moment. Like, look, it's either now or nothing at all. We're either done or we're going to fix this. So let's rebuild from the ground up, because now we've got 2 kids. I had a miscarriage, in the middle of all of our hardest struggles, and we decided, all right, well, we made the promises, we're going to keep them. Yeah. We did believe in God and in our vows, and we didn't just make those promises to each other, Yeah. And so we stuck to that, and we're like, all right, well, we say that we have God at the foundation of things, but do we really? Let's really reevaluate here and start over. Fix that foundation.
No matter how old you are, your parents divorce at any age. Like, that's what you always know, and that's the foundation that you're building on. Yeah. With that and the miscarriage, there's so much getting slapped around, pretty much, right? A lot too. Yeah. And sometimes I take that as God coming along, chastening some of it, not causing those things. I'm just saying, allowing it to happen to us, to shape us in a way. Oh, yeah. How did that came about in the next few years or so? Did you find a church, or did you?
Well, once we turned it over to God again, amazing things started happening in our lives. Mm-hmm. And I mean, one example was our things in our house were falling apart. Our brand new house, mind you, built right before we bought it. And our foundation had cracked, and
literally, and
things had flooded. We needed to replace. It was probably about, I think it was somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 worth of repairs that needed to be done. Things were happening in the military that were really difficult to deal with, and we weren't really sure what the future was with his career, his income, anything like that. It was looking pretty rough. Mm-hmm. And we're like, how are we going to
potentially getting kicked out? I was going through mental, physical, emotional problems, and just dealing with a lot of baggage, and that was affecting the marriage.
The deployments, and things that just never got addressed, and
ever
usually don't when you're in the military. Yeah. So it wasn't
because my schedule was like 6 months on, 6 months off, and even during those 6 months that I was off, I was training. Mm-hmm. The op tempo was insane. I mean, I never saw her.
Move on. Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much what it was like. It was just get over it and move on. Do what you got to do. Yeah. And so everything got shoved down. And so his things that he needed to deal with came to a head. All at the same time. And but then we just kind of literally fell on our faces before God.
There was the day that it broke was the day that I think it was the first time in my life I had seen her in pain. Like true pain that I swore I would never inflict on her ever again. Because like when you see somebody that you've hurt like that, it's okay, put it this way. War sucks. But I never wanted to kill myself because I knew that if I could find truth, I could get over that. I can reconcile all the problems that I had seen and gone through. But with her, like that was the first time I wanted to kill myself. Because it was just because I loved her. I know I wasn't good at it. I sucked at loving her. I sucked at serving her, right? But just seeing that pain, it was the first time in my life I could say, like, I wanted to end it all because it was just too unbearable. And at that moment, I was like, all right, God, like, you got to take control or I'm going to lose control completely. And it's not going to be good, you know?
Well, likewise for me, too. I like to have control, very much so. And, you know, things fit in a box the way that I want them. And I had no control, and I had been fighting it for so long, and trying to control him and the situations. I think when you're going through stuff like that, like you both have to recognize it's both of you.
Yeah.
It's not his fault. It's not my
It
fault.
was a
It's both of us.
cyclical problem. Like the things that I would do would cause her to do something, and the things that she would do would cause me to do something. And it got to the point where it was just the dragon eating its tail.
Yeah.
You know? And
Constant blame.
yeah. And the thing is, like, I was looking, I mean, I'll be completely transparent. I was looking to her as my own God because I didn't know God. I thought I did, but I was looking to her to make me feel better because I had gone through so much. I mean, I joined at 17. That's all I knew was the military. And I didn't know what it was like to be just normal. And I had a lot of problems that I was facing. So I was looking to her to be my God. And then every time that she would fail me, I'd get mad, you know? And, or if she wasn't doing what I thought she needed to do to help me, I would get angry, you know?
Yeah.
And then of course that would suck life out of her. And this it would just be this nasty cycle, you know?
Yeah. So we both had to surrender. We both had to, admit things. We had some very honest conversations, probably for the first time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was really ugly, and sometimes it was wonderful, and it was a long process.
Yeah.
And but God was so good to us. He gave us everything that we needed, not only to fix the house, but to give us the time to restore our marriage.
That's a good story right there.
We had spent one really wonderful day before his last appointment. He was going back to the Middle East, and we snuck away for one awesome 24-hour period. Woo! And in Hilton Head, in Hilton Head Island, and it was like the most perfect day, and he loved it. We always wanted to go back, and unbeknownst to us, while we're going through all of these things, there was somebody, I can't remember his position, but there was somebody in the Army that recommended us
Pete.
for...
It was Pete.
Yes.
Yeah, Pete it was a group within special operations. They're civilians. A lot of them are retired. And they work with special operators, whether it be financially, physically, emotionally, and they have different resources for you. And like she said, we didn't know this, but when I was going through being medically retired, I met Pete during this process because they help maximize your benefits when you get out. And so, you know, we were just talking, and I was telling him my story, and that's when he had referred us to Operation Healing Forces, which is a nonprofit organization that essentially pays for special operations soldiers to go on week-long retreats
With their wives.
Okay.
And reconnect and then work through problems through meeting other couples and through other various resources. So, and you can take it from here. You can explain it better than me.
And so, well, there's not much to say about that except that we found out that we'd been selected for an all expenses paid week-long trip to Hilton Head Island.
Nice.
And so we figured it out all together. We probably received about $80,000 worth of
Benefits.
things that year that never came out of our pocket, and enough to send us back to Texas, to give us a good head start. We were able to sell our house, repair our house completely. Everything just lined up so quickly, and then the actual process of him working through the retirement process normally takes, for some people, over a year. Him, it took 2.5 months.
Yes.
So they got the final seal, and we were out because I was like, I gotta get out of here. I'm withering here. Like we can't do this anymore. I cannot be here. And just, you know, again, praying. And he just lined everything up. And whatever we would need money for, I'd be like, oh my gosh, we're not going to have money to pay this bill. It's just...
Yeah, our foundation was $32,000 and some change.
Yeah.
And we got a check in the mail for the exact penny.
And not only that, but all the little things
and the other things too. Yeah.
Oh, our bill, this bill was a little bit more than we expected. We don't have enough money for it. Literally another unexpected check, some rebate or refund from like 5 years ago that comes in, and it was literally to the penny every single time. It got to the point, it was happening so often, every time I would go to the mailbox, I would expect a check to be in it for everything that we needed. And it was so consistent and it was never more than what we needed.
Yeah.
But it was always exactly what we needed.
And I think God was just doing that just to say, you know what, you guys, like, thanks for just surrendering, and I'm going to show you my faithfulness.
Yes, exactly.
You know, and it was never about the money.
No, it was always just a reminder that He's there, and He's there.
Like I'm going to get you where you need to go.
Listening, and He's taking care of us.
Because there's no way we were going to be able to get back to Texas without any financial assistance from God. There was just no way. We would have been stuck in North Carolina, and if we were stuck there, we probably would have been divorced. Yeah. To be honest with you, it's just a bad environment to raise a family. It's a military town, and there's nowhere else to go.
So what you mentioned something about a medical retirement. Is that how you phrased it?
Yeah, I was medically retired. So I had a bad jump. It was a night jump, no loom, which is no moon, and I just remember it was a beautiful day, really, really warm. And then all of a sudden it cooled off really fast. And once that sun had gone down, and so we had a lot of updrafts, and we were pretty high up there. And this updraft hit just at the right moment. And when I went to pivot out the door, it dropped. And from the updraft, or it went up and then it dropped. And when that happened, my knee basically caught the edge of the door, and it threw me out, and I just spun and spun and spun. And so my risers got caught, my control lines got caught around the riser, so it was like pinching off. Oof. And when I spun, my control lines had snapped, and so I had no control. And then when I went to go manual, like old school, like you see in the movies where they'd pull their risers, that didn't work because the control lines had snapped and wrapped around those the risers. So I couldn't see the ground. I couldn't even see the hand in front of my face. It's like that's how dark it was. I had no clue how high I was, how fast I was coming in, and they're directional chutes, so they don't like just fall down. Like what you see in the movies. Like you have to steer it into the wind and slow down. So I'm just screaming in. Like we had high winds at night, and so high winds plus whatever the chute is going forward, which is like 12 knots, I think. Yeah, I just came screaming in, and I'm just praying. Like I tell you what, I prayed hard. I was like, God, like please, I don't want to hit a tree. I don't want to hit water. I just want to live. Like get me out of this. So I hit the ground. I remember my feet hitting, and then I was like on my back. And luckily, the wind, I guess like the chute had got caught up in some brush, so the wind didn't take me. That would have killed me. Like, cause there's been times where like the chute will get, people will get knocked out, and they're in an open area, and that wind will keep dragging you. And people got messed up that way because they get knocked out. Well, I woke up. I'm like, okay, everything's fine, feeling good, and brought the chute back, and I woke up the next morning, and I couldn't move my neck. Like, people was talking about, I got a stiff neck. Like, no, this was concrete. There was no moving it left or right, up or down, extremely painful. And mind you, I had like 2 weeks until a deployment to Afghanistan. And so I was like, all right, babe, chiropractor, help me out, and yeah,
wasn't much I could do.
Yeah, there wasn't much. So long story short, I'm in Afghanistan. Things aren't going right with my health. All of a sudden, like my arms are going numb, I'm having problems with my back, like things just aren't right. And turns out like I had ripped a disc in my neck and completely thrown it out. And so they put me on desk duty, and so I get back, and of course I'm still on profile, meaning like I'm not allowed to do any physical activity. And I'm like, well, since I'm on profile, I'm just get everything else checked out. Yeah. And next thing I know, I'm, having 3 surgeries on my ankle.
Just got a medical stack that's high.
No, I mean, I got a box that's this big, full of just medical documents from all my appointments and surgeries. I think
that's how it went so quickly. I think whoever was working that day just looked at that stack and was like, yeah, whatever.
Done. So I ended up, just getting everything addressed. And by the time I got everything addressed, they're like, you're just too broke, dude. Yeah. You got to go. And 2 months, 2.5 months later, it was just like, okay, bye.
Yeah. So we went back to Texas.
Yep.
Got back to our church. Found out I was pregnant as we were moving into the apartment.
Is that with Levi or?
The youngest. No, we already had Levi.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Eve.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
A lot has happened.
And actually found out I was pregnant with her the week that I was supposed to have had the other baby. Oh. And so that was kind of a little
good timing.
Blessing. Yeah.
Yeah. And we would have had twins.
Yes. She had a twin, actually.
Yeah.
But
we lost her, or I think it's her.
I don't know. I think so too. But anyway. So, so I kind of consider myself a mother of 5, but.
Yeah. And you are.
But it was a good year. Being in Texas was great for us.
The year of
really
recovery.
Brought us back. Yeah. It
just
brought us
being
back
normal.
to each other. It brought us back to our values. Speaking of, in the meantime, like I had said before, my views had done a 180. And it was kind of a gradual process through all this growth that we were going through. Yeah. But I began to really embrace the role of wife and mother that's outlined in Scripture. I started to see why it is that way.
Yeah.
Because we're designed to do such different things, and I realized that trying to do it all it's not going to work out for me at all.
Yeah, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
I had to make a choice.
Isn't that amazing that not only that we are designed, but there's also a role that fits the design.
Exactly.
Yeah. But how do those two, if for example, evolution was true, for example. Right. How do you mix those kind of things? Like it's impossible.
Exactly,
it doesn't marry up right.
They complement each other so perfectly.
Yeah.
And my responsibilities are not his responsibilities, and I'm thankful for that. I don't want his burdens.
Yeah.
I have my own. I got enough to do.
Exactly.
As a man, I'm like, man, you can. Now, I'm not saying like, as a father, I'm not supposed to take care of my children. Of course I do. I interact with them, and but I interact with them in a different way.
Yeah.
I'm the authority, the discipline, the a mentor, to my sons to make sure that they become good, godly men, make sure that my daughter becomes a good, godly woman. I set the standards, but I can't. I've been Mr. Dad, and what's interesting is when you're doing a role that you're not designed to do, it wears you out 10 times faster.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I've said this before. I've gone on like 50-kilometer like hikes, and I feel great. Yeah, sure, I'm tired, but I feel great.
Yeah.
But give me 50 hours with children, I do not feel great, and I'm exhausted, and mentally, physically, emotionally, it's just too much.
Yeah.
But if I was to stay up for 50 hours and trying to, protect my family, provide for them, and whatever it is, that role, I might be physically tired, but mentally, I'm solid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just a testimony to biblical truth.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
we continued to grow, and the church was instrumental in that. I think a major turning point for us was when we got baptized in that church in Texas.
Yeah. Okay. And I got to baptize you. That was such an honor. Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
So Pastor Cameron baptized you, and he turned it over to you, baptized me. And I remember, and I was still pregnant with Eve, and I remember I was like, you know what? I still have some things that we need to settle. Like all this stuff we've been through, I need to have one more final conversation with you. and we're getting baptized tomorrow. I'm not going under that water with all this stuff still stewing, right? And so we were up till like 3 a.m. Maybe later. I don't know. But we had that conversation, and by the end of it, I was like, okay, all right. I'm ready to literally put it all behind. Because I wanted to come up out of that water a new person with all of that behind us.
And we both had been baptized before, too.
I had not.
Oh, I thought you had.
No, I never had.
Oh, I had been. But I really didn't consider myself
I
baptized.
had several opportunities.
Oh, okay.
Even as a kid and in youth group. And why aren't you getting baptized? And I was like, I'm not just going to... I don't even know what I'm getting baptized for. Like,
you knew then.
I definitely knew then. Yes.
Yeah. And I guess from that point forward, she allowed me to assume that role as, I don't want to say the man, but the shepherd, the leader, you know, and I don't, you know, that's another thing I think that a lot of, I don't say a lot, but there is a significant amount of Christian men out there who think, okay, if I'm the leader, I make all the choices. That's not necessarily true. Like, I'm a shepherd. There's a big difference. Like,
but you take it seriously. You take the responsibility seriously.
Yes.
It's on your head.
Yeah,
you know?
it is.
And that's why I was like, once I realized that, I was like, take that. You can have that.
Yeah. And I take that responsibility of the failure and the successes of my family do fall on my head, not her.
Yeah.
So I take that role with pride in a biblical way, you know?
Yeah.
And, but from that baptism though, I was able to assume that role to lead, but have her alongside me as I led. Not behind me, not in front of me, but beside me. Which kind of goes back to Genesis, where, you know, God took the rib from Adam's side. You know, that's representation that, you know, well, it's a side-by-side relationship. You know, and so that's kind of how I lead now, is that, you know, I'm going to bring you alongside with me. And I still ask her her opinions and her thoughts. I don't just disregard it because you're inferior to me, you know, the weaker vessel. And, you know, which is, it's true, you know, women are the weaker vessel, but it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
You know?
But they complement her with many other things.
Yes.
Caring and, you know, because that's the role, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The perverse world that we live in, where we see the other types of pairings, you already know those things fall apart. There's no foundation. There is nothing they can stand on. There is no complementing each other.
Right. Because you're all trying to do stuff.
Yeah.
You're all trying to do everything.
Right. And to say we are evoluting to be better species, it's all nonsense. You still have to adhere to the foundation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like there's no other way around it.
Yeah, and it's easier that way.
Oh my goodness,
it makes it
it's a lot
the
easier.
divisions of the responsibilities come so much easier that way.
Yeah.
And let's talk about how we got here and how we met you. I think that's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
About how we got here.
Yeah.
So we were in Texas. We loved Texas. And 2020.
Just not the transformation of it all.
Everything changed so quickly. With the people that were moving there, you know, no, nothing against, but the environment was changing rapidly. The population was changing. The finances were changing.
I mean, that's what really happened.
The landscape, the skyline, like everything that we loved about it was changing, and the things that our young children were being exposed to were like alarming. And I was like, we gotta get out of here. And as much as we loved it, we considered it home, we knew it was time to start looking elsewhere. And so I was like, all right, fine. If we're doing this again, I have a list.
There's 12 things on a whiteboard. Okay, so this is the thing you have to understand about Rachel. She is a methodical planner. Like, just saying, if anybody wants to hire her to plan anything, just, you know, reach out and hire her, because she will plan 3 ways to Sunday.
Yeah.
And so we had a whiteboard, 12 things.
A whiteboard in our bedroom, a
With
giant
state
one.
by state by state.
Yeah,
You know,
I had
the
columns, I had rows. The rows were my requirements. There was probably like 12 that I needed and about maybe 3 or 4 that you just kind of wanted. And then 5 states across the top. And I would just go through each one and check what they had, check off what they did. I was like, yep, that's not enough. Wipe that one off, replace it with a new one.
No.
I had no idea
Yeah.
where we were supposed to go. But we were looking, and then and I was in real estate actually at the time. It was a more flexible way to make a little bit of extra money. He was doing security,
Yep.
and so our schedules were flexible, but we were also considered essential. So we were still working through the whole pandemic.
Yep. Thank God.
And as soon as the pandemic happened, it was actually, I think it was the day after my birthday. My birthday was the last day that we were all allowed to
Be free.
be free. And it was a good day.
That was a
And then the
beautiful
next day, the entire world shut down. I couldn't believe it. We were in Austin.
Yeah.
And we come out of our house and go down the highway, and everything is it's a ghost town. And I was like, just amazed that it could be.
I will say, getting
so
to work was
instant.
so easy.
Oh, yeah. There were some things that became easier. But I was just shocked at how quickly
People
the whole world
conformed.
complied. And I was like, okay, we were still questioning what was really going on. I wasn't like, I'm not going to, at the time. And I was like, okay, but this is weird. Does
And
anybody
Austin
not
shouldn't be
notice
that
this?
shocking too
It was
in the same time.
It was shocking. And
Yeah.
but it was like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like,
Yeah,
I shouldn't be
yeah.
too surprised, but it was like, but the whole thing, like
Yeah.
it went
Yeah.
from life to nothing.
Sure.
And everybody was so afraid. And I was like,
It was a
This is
spirit of
just
fear that came over
nutty.
that entire city.
yeah. And I
That's what
thought
it
to
was.
myself, man, if this could happen with something like this, I don't even want to fathom if something worse came about. And how, there were people just wrapped around the grocery store just for hours and hours, just hoping that by the time they got in there was something left. I'm like, I am not willing to live like that. I'm not willing to
Yeah.
to just hope that I'm going to be able to feed my children. If the whole world decides to shut down like that, again, like we are way too reliant on the system. Like
Yeah.
it was a big wake up call, I think, for a lot of us. And it was for me.
Yeah.
And he
And I-
always wanted to move back to the country.
I had been preparing her to move out to the country for quite some time.
Yeah.
But I couldn't force. You can't force this woman to do anything. Like not even like I know it kind of seems blasphemous for me to say this, but even God knows I can't force her. Like
Kinda-
So I've been working on her, put little seeds okay, hey, don't you want to have your own food? Don't you want to, be able to have this for our children and just kind of for 8-9 years, whatever, just planting these little seeds. And then 2020 happened and she's like, Michael, we got to move.
Yeah. Well, I think
Yeah.
that's part of the, the rebellious nature in me. You tell me I have to. Good luck with that. You cannot tell me that I have to stay in my house. You cannot tell me. You know what I mean? That's how I am. It's just in me that way. And
It's hard for me to believe that you. When I look at all the things you guys are doing, which obviously we'll talk about, I can't imagine that you've never been like that before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, I thought you guys were both wanting countryside of things.
Oh no!
No.
See, I grew up in the country, and she grew up in the city. So
Yeah.
she was like,
I never
here's the
wanted to-
funny thing. Here's the
Yeah.
funny thing. When we were, so she was driving down to Texas with me from Chicago. We drove through Oklahoma, and she's like, I'm never gonna move here, ever.
Every time I say never, God laughs at me and says,
Okay.
Really? And that ends up being exactly what we do.
I'm
and
never
I'm
gonna
willing
move
to
the
do
country.
it. By the time it happens, it's like, okay, fine. So yeah, 2020, and we narrowed everything down. Oklahoma looked actually pretty good. It made its way onto the board, and I was like, wow, I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, one night I
researched,
was,
liked.
What were the criterias?
Oh gosh, it was everything from
Well, land, water, affordability, taxes, gun rights, abortion rights.
Not rights, but
sorry, I fell into that one, didn't I? And a pro-life, I should say, pro-life, because
by that time I had also done a complete 180 on that. I was very much liberal on the sense of in my 20s, and then when I had Eve. I remember holding her. She was like a month old. And New York passed a law that you could have an abortion all the way up to birth.
Yeah.
And I just was like, have I contributed to this in my support of this? I cannot believe it has come to this. And I just looked at her and I'm like, are you serious?
Yeah.
People would do this to this, my beautiful baby. And it just broke my heart. And so I just, that's it. I can no longer excuse any of this. I can no longer,
whether it be rape or incest, it doesn't matter because, like, okay, so something bad happens, so now you're going to respond with more violence.
Yeah.
Like, that's your solution.
You should allow God to bring the blessing through the pain.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my feeling.
That's how it should be, and that's the basis for abolition of abortion Oklahoma, not abolition of Oklahoma.
I got what you're saying.
Which we are part of, which we support the abolition of abortion, and that's just to throw a little bit off road here a bit on this subject. We always talk about being pro-life. There's another stage of that. That's the abolition. We want to see complete abolition of abortion. And that's, as you guys were discussing and saying, that God is going to do great things if you stick with Him. And yes, the other side of the argument would always blame us for putting other people through something like this, but they never ever discuss what we are going to put through that baby through. Because we think, it's something that we never feel. Scientists and scientific studies have shown they can hear, they can taste,
feel,
they can feel, they can laugh, they can cry. It's a human being.
And now now we know, I think when I was younger and in the generations before, ultrasound was kind of just becoming a normal thing, and they definitely didn't do that in the abortion clinic if you're like freaking out and I gotta go to, and I supported my friends through those things hardcore. Sometimes I was the only one who supported them, and but I do remember saying, one of them asked me once, "What do you think? You're a Christian. Do you think God hates me?" And I said, "No, I think there's a lot of gray right now, and I think that there's grace." And this was back, but there were a lot of unanswered questions for us at the time. And there is a lot of grace. And I have seen the healing that comes after the fact too, if you allow it. And there's just so much about it that I'm passionate about. And I don't fault people that have, because like I said, I've walked through those situations, but I believe a lot of it was just ignorance. We were not told anything. And we lived in a world where, ladies, you got to get your education. You got to have your career. You can't settle. You can't let anything stop you. It was ingrained in us. It was pounded into our heads. Before you even think about getting married, you can't rely on a man in today's world. You have to. Nothing can stop you. And so, and we were young, and we believed these people that we trusted. And so, yes, I do very firmly believe there is total grace in that situation.
In fact, we have a couple of those ministries here. At least there's one in town that helps women through that process.
Yes.
If they went through and then repenting of it.
Because there's always regret later.
And it like you were saying earlier, anything that you've done, messed up, all that, it just doesn't go away completely. And then we're going to see the fullness of that only when we reborn
takes
into the
years.
new life.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Until then, I think we're going to carry portions of that in our memories and in our interactions, the way that we are,
Yeah.
our character, and so on and so forth. There's,
Yes.
God still cleanses us through all of that still, redeems us through it. But you're going to see some of that still. In fact, I'm excited. I think I haven't asked her, but she did offer it. Victoria Robinson is a national speaker for women who have gone through and repented on time. Would love to have her on the show. So we'll talk to her and then bring her on and have her share her experiences.
And I'm actually quite proud of her because she had her own pro-life ministry in Texas.
Oh,
she would, like, girls that decided, okay, we're not going to have this abortion.
Yeah.
And she would support them.
Yeah.
They would educate them. And a lot of these girls were single moms. So she empowered them to become successful moms.
Well, that's good because you can now get involved. Tim Gillespie, who is the chairman of the board for Abolition of Abortion Oklahoma, is coming here to our home.
Good.
So we're going to hang out and see all the options. So I'm part of the board now.
That's awesome.
And he is the chairman. And he's
things I didn't know about you.
There you go.
So we're gonna have him over. We're gonna interview him. We're gonna talk. So I would love for you guys to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes.
So Oklahoma was very much pro-life, and that's why it had drawn us here. So
it literally checked all the boxes.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, "Oh my gosh, am I moving to Oklahoma?"
Well,
And
one night I was on Google Maps, and she was like, "Okay, well, just look around Oklahoma,
see what's there, available."
And so what I had done was I found this little gray dot. I looked at Tulsa, Oklahoma City. Of course, I was like, "Nah, this isn't gonna work. It's a big city," and there was no other major cities, and there was like this one little speck in the corner, and I was like, okay, it's not a tiny speck, but it's not a big gray speck. It's a small, big gray, speck. And I was like, okay, Bartlesville. And
it's always known as the big small city. Always been.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I checked it out and think of this, and of course, like I had said earlier, that she's the master planner, and she's like, let's go. Okay,
well,
this is
at the same time I was kind of looking too, and I also found properties in the same town, separate from him.
Yeah,
I was a realtor, so I could look, and I was like, okay, that's kind of weird that we picked the same town.
Let's go.
And I was like, yeah, we'll have to go visit. I mean, obviously there's something to this. And then I came back in the room like 5 minutes later, and I was like, let's just go this weekend. It was like, he's like, and you mean in like 2 days? And I said, yeah.
Which is like the weirdest thing.
We got our own schedule.
Yeah.
It's a pandemic. What else is going on?
Yeah.
And so we just pretty much packed up and left and made some last minute plans, last minute phone calls. I got hooked up with a realtor here who had also just moved from Austin to this town.
Oh wow.
So and Kayla at KW, she's awesome. Kayla Henninger. And she showed us around. We were exploring the area. Well, as soon as we drove into Oklahoma, I started crying. I just knew this is it. We're going in the right direction.
Well, the presence of Oklahoma, we
weren't even driving through a nice part of it.
No, but the presence, you can tell
and I was like, wow,
that God has his hand on Oklahoma. And by the way, anybody who doesn't, anybody who like follows politics, Oklahoma's the only state where every county voted Republican.
Yeah. Yes.
So that just kind of like gives you an idea of the kind of people that live here. They're God-fearing.
Not that we put our faith in.
No, but I'm just saying it's just kind of, it's a good indicator,
of the values.
It is
of
the
value
system. And my friends that I knew from India who are Americans who live from California told me, you live in that one state, the reddest of all red. Like every county goes red.
Yeah. Even the city is like, what?
Yeah.
Maybe by a small margin, but still.
So we had gotten up here, and of course, it's like a 9-10 hour drive with kids. It's chaotic. We got the dog. We're stressing out because like we have this urge to move, right? So there's this expectation, like we got to find something. And pretty much everything that we had looked at was either already sold or it was a dud
Yeah.
Or whatever.
It just didn't feel right.
Didn't feel right, and...
But there were not a lot of things being sold at the time too, right?
Yes.
It was kind of a complete freeze.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, long story short, Saturday, she's a wreck. Huh? Sunday. Sunday.
We were planning on staying till Monday
Yeah.
or Tuesday, but it was Sunday morning, and I was like,
yeah, she was a wreck.
What is going on? I know we're supposed to be here. Nothing is working out. The kids were getting difficult. It was a stressful trip.
They were butt heads. They were butt heads, And so I was like, hey, let's just go for a drive and explore. Mm-hmm. And so we went down Highway 60. And as we driving by, I was like, hey, let's go down this dirt road later. Let's check it out. It looks like a fun dirt road. Mm. And so we get out to Newata County. We're looking around. We're like, oh, okay, this is definitely not where we want to move. There's not a whole lot out there. There's nothing that's in a good condition. So we turned around, came back, and then you can explain that one better to me.
I texted Kayla, and I said, all right, because we were trying to stay on the low end of our, our approved loan amount or whatever. Mm. And so we started off really low. I was like, all right, let's bump it up a little bit. And about 5 minutes later, she sent me a link. She's like, well, this one's not on MLS. This one's a for sale by owner. She sent me a Zillow link. And I'm going through it. And I'm like, and the more I read, the more I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. Oh my gosh, this is it. And at the very bottom, open house today, 2 to 4. It's 158. Kayla! We gotta get over there right now. And she's like, I'm not wearing any makeup, but okay. I'll throw on a shirt and I'll meet you at the gas station and I'll take you there. And I said, okay. So we rushed, we hurried up and we got here and...
Well, we were going down 60 and we're like, hey, this is the same direction we had came before. Yeah. I'm like, cool, this is kind of nice. I like this direction because it's country. Mm-hmm. And then we make a right. And I'm like, and Rachel's like, isn't this the road that you're like, let's go check out?
This is the road you pointed to, Mike. Yeah. And he was like, oh my gosh, it is.
Yeah, it's the same road. And so we get down to the house.
Like, oh my God. And it starts again, the heart pounding.
And I know she was excited because she starts hitting me. And I'm like, she's excited.
And before we even saw the house, I just knew, Yeah. And we pull in the driveway and he made a beeline one way and I made a beeline the other. He went to the husband who was on one side and I went to the wife who was on the front porch. And
I never saw the house.
Did a quick run through of the house and then planted myself on the back porch and started talking to her. And he was talking to the husband. Dewey. I was talking to her for about an hour. And by the end of it, I was like, we are buying this house. So we put in our offer that night, wrote a letter, and they got plenty of other offers for more than what we offered, but they picked us.
Wow.
And the reason why was because they wanted a family to take the house. They wanted to see, because their children grew up in that house.
Yeah.
And they wanted to see the same thing. And all the other folks that were putting in had like teenagers or they were older, retirement. Mm. And so they had a lot of money on their hands. Mm-hmm. But they're like, we're just going to give it to you. Yep. For asking price. And we're like, cool.
And that was it. And so we
bought a house.
We bought a house, but it was contingent. We had to sell ours.
Yes.
Our house is still under remodeling construction.
Yeah, I had the bathroom down to the studs and concrete.
Well, we're going to cut this trip short. We got to get back. We have 10 days to get this on the market. And we didn't sleep for that whole time.
Yeah.
Like, took care of the kids and went to work.
I was still in school.
And he was doing school online. And when the kids went to bed, that's when our work started. And we didn't sleep for 2 weeks straight. Yeah. And
we were, I don't cry very often.
Oh, tears all the time.
Yeah, there were tears because just the pain. Like I was still going through like rehab essentially. Yeah. And I had just like fresh surgery.
And the physical.
Oh man, it was awful. Mm-hmm. Just the pain. The pain was just awful. Physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever. Yep. And of course she was crying because she's stressed out. I'm playing it cool.
And then all the things that go along with building a house or buying a house,
Yeah.
Sure,
it's a stressful thing anyway. But everything worked out.
The day we put the house on the market was the day I finished the bathroom and the rest of the house, because I had it down to concrete and studs. Like when I say the bathroom, it was pretty much...
There was no bathroom.
There was no bathroom. There was no plumbing, no nothing. No. And so I redid it all.
Again, the timing was...
Right down to the wire.
Everything just worked out perfect
Yeah.
day.
Put the house on the market, and 3 hours later, we essentially had it sold.
We forgot to tell people we were moving until about 3 days before.
Yeah.
Because it happened so fast. 45 days later, we were moving in.
Wow.
And it has been a godsend. Like, he brought us here, for sure.
Yeah.
The family that we have made here,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's just... It was like the finishing touches on what our marriage really needed. Not that we're done by any means, but like we are now, I feel confident where God wants us to be at this point in our lives. And we are meeting people always that just keep sharpening us and keep strengthening our faith. And then our neighbor moved out and put the house on the market. And we were like, oh no.
Well, we don't, because our neighbor was great. He was a quiet guy, respectable guy, and we're like, oh no, like he's moving. We don't want crappy neighbors. Like having a bad neighbor is like having a nagging wife. You know, it's just
right. So praying. Oh, praying hardcore, praying specific things.
Yeah.
You know, like God, please, and meantime, we had gotten our kids involved in the
Trail
Life organization.
Yep.
And
how did you hear about that?
That was through.
We were looking for it.
So it was actually, but you had seen it through. I was working at the food pantry.
Yeah.
And then
I don't remember how
we were friends. I was friends with one of the one of the people at the food pantry, and I told you to like friend her on Facebook, and they were like in the whole homeschool grouping world.
And somebody mentioned it
through that.
So I started looking into it, and we started making phone calls, and it took a while because there was the pandemic and whatever.
Things were still getting started.
Yeah, in the beginning phases. So then once they started back up again, we got involved. The kids liked the other kids. They became friends. Mike was going to the meetings. Mike met this awesome guy named Gijo. They were going to go out to coffee one day. They go out to coffee. And he comes back and he tells me this long roundabout story about this guy and their life. And I'm like, is there a point to this? Is there a point to this story? I was like not having a good day that day either, I didn't think. And he's like, come on. and he's like, well, so our neighbors, I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but he's like, our new neighbors are going to be
She's a prayer warrior. Like, she may not necessarily pray like she ought to, like a good Southern Baptist.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But when she prays, though, God listens because she does have a heart, a faith of a mustard seed, you know, which makes me very proud. And so she had prayed for
very specific things.
Specific things, and God answered our prayers
you guys
once
were
again.
all of them. So. And I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, yet again, the Lord has been so faithful. And it's just our entire life together has been such a testament to his goodness.
Yeah. And we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah. Like, and the changes that he has made in us and how far we've come.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I'm still like, I'm just ever more humbled, you know, like, yeah, we've come so far, but at the same time, I'm like, there's still so much more
that we have to work on.
I know there's so much more, but I also know that he's going to walk us through it, every step of it.
Yeah.
Because of where we were and where we are now, that I have, the faith has just been strengthened through that.
Yeah. When we got close to all the paperwork and everything, we had some bumpy roads because of business and all that sort of thing. Lots of paperwork, much more than like probably 50% more paperwork to get this going. But after I saw Mike at the coffee shop, and I just in passing mentioned that we're looking at a house.
Yeah.
And he said, we're looking at a house, looking to move, etc. We really like this house.
Yeah.
Usually my wife and I, it's very rare that we both like the same house that much.
Yeah.
And so this was a rare thing. And so I mentioned to him, and he said, well, where is it? And I kind of meant, again, not expecting him to know exactly where. And I didn't take that question serious. And I said, yeah, it's it's a little outside the city. He said, no, but where exactly? He said, it's someplace in US 60, Nowata Road. And he's like, okay, where exactly? So that was the third one.
Yeah, I was like, well, like, where at, man? Like,
give me the address.
I know. I was hesitating only because I don't know if it matters, but something was going on at the time.
Yeah.
So I told him exactly where it was.
You didn't even really know each other that well. You're like,
no,
why is this guy asking me?
That was the first time we were actually officially
alone,
hanging out or
getting to know each other
briefly. Maybe 2 weeks. We shook hands, said hi, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Then he said, you're the one who said, hey, can we grab coffee? And he said, yeah, I'm always doing that. Let's do it. So we go to Jude's and sit there and then have this conversation. As soon as I said where the house was, he stood up and was pacing all over. Not coming back to sit back down on it because I don't know what is going on.
He looked very confused.
Yeah, I had no idea why you were pacing.
And I'm just smiling now ear to ear, and and you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah. He finally came, sat down, and he held my hand like this and you're going to be our neighbor.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is I was like, oh, I remember. I said, you have a pool, don't you?
Yeah.
And it's on the left-hand side. And you kept, saying yes. And that's when I freaked out because I knew exactly what Chasa was. And I was like, I've been in your house more than you have.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I remember you saying that.
Yeah.
And you told me all about it and then told me more about, the previous owner and so on. And the land, you spoke great amounts about the land and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so my son and your son's in trail life. And then we come to actually visit, and then you came and you told me, Mike told me about your specific prayer, the things that you were praying for in a neighbor since you learned that he was leaving.
Yeah.
And I think one was homeschool, Christian homeschool. I think that was
Christian homeschooler.
Right?
Yep. With
obviously kids around our kids' age.
Around the same age. Yep.
Strong marriage, strong, family, and same values.
Yeah.
And same visions.
Boom. God dropped that one right into our lap.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
We pretty much agree on politics. I mean, we go to the same church. Right. We agree on pretty much everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're producing the show together.
Right.
Yeah. Hosting and producing.
And I think we've talked, I was talking to Aaron, was it Aaron or you? But anyway, we were talking about how even our strengths complement each other.
Oh, yeah.
And, we compliment you and you compliment us and your knowledge and everything that everybody brings to the table is just like,
it fits perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful to get to know you guys, and it's been just amazing. Yeah. Yes. So we pray a lot of times, that's so good too good to be true type of,
Right.
This is one of those. Yes. And, and my prayer now always is to continue to strengthen us, protect us, because that's the thing that happens, right? A lot of times. And I'm just being very blunt and vulnerable in saying that. These other relationships that are friendships that needs to put extra work in order to protect, because that's where exactly enemy comes in. And I'm very well aware of those type of tactics and stuff. And so I'm always, my antlers are up when it comes to that because of it. Yeah, because God gives us something precious and ask and demand us to protect it. Yeah, and in it He finds pleasure, right? So that's anyway. So
I completely agree. And so here we are now, and we're just looking forward to that next chapter. We really don't know where it's going to go exactly. We're kind of in a holding pattern right now, which is always difficult.
We are.
So are we.
Right, yeah. But it's, we've learned to just let God lead.
Yeah.
His timing is always perfect.
Yes.
Always perfect.
Well, I mean,
like
we wanna...
you were guys saying that how God was answering precise prayers.
Yeah.
You know, His Holy Spirit allows us to do that.
Yes.
According
to His will.
According to His will,
Right.
that we reach out and ask, and God has provided. You know, we've been going through a lot. You know, been through a lot. We're still going through a lot of things. Now, I'm not going to take over your
No, I get
time,
it.
but just to say that God is really raising up what is coming. We don't know what is coming. We talk about it, right?
Yes.
In order to prepare our children, if you don't know how to prepare them, we're going to put them in a great disadvantaged position when it comes to this world.
Yes.
And so I feel like we're under training in all different ways. Moving us to places, training us. Brad at church speaks a lot about it because he moved from Colorado.
Right.
And he speaks very specifically about how God moved many of us to certain areas. Yeah. And it may not be just Bartlesville, but I'm saying cities like that.
Specific places,
and so I don't know what is coming. I can sense some of it. And God says that Christians, you should know when the time is closer.
Yes.
Doesn't know the exact time, but we know the times are closer. So we kind of have a perfect place to kind of prepare for that, and we thank God for those type of provisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's on your mind as far as next, say?
It does actually tie into that a little bit. There are certain things that I'm very certain on, and we kind of touched on it today. Like a Christian, I do believe that a Christian persecution, not necessarily like dragging us out in the streets kind of persecution, but we're already seeing this the narrative being built. These crazy Christian nationalists, like that's not even a thing.
Yes,
like
it's made up.
you're a Christian. Who is a patriot, or you're Christian, or you're not a patriot. There's no Christian nationalist that I'm aware of, And so there's this narrative that's being built around this idea that we are the threat now. The Christians are the threat. And when things get bad financially, physically in this country, you have to blame somebody. And so you have to blame the minority, because you can't blame the majority, because the majority will turn on you.
Yeah.
So the government has to blame the minority. And so true Christian believers will have a target on their back. Yeah. And I don't say that necessarily to spread fear, but that's historically the way things have always been, whether you're Jew or you're the smallest tribe in Africa or the smallest minority in India. It doesn't matter. Yeah. When things get hard, you become a target when you're the minority. Yeah. And so now these narratives are being put out there by the mainstream media that these Christian country people are the threat to democracy. Yeah. And so kind of tying into the election, my vision was that was given to me 7 years ago in 2020 was prepare your family emotionally or spiritually, I should say. Get your house in order, get your finances in order. In 7 years, things are going to be changing. I don't know what that means. Yeah. However, I do know that God was very specific, like get your house in order, get your finances in order, and get your spiritual walk in order. And so part of that is we were looking at starting the church at our property, just because I can see the way that politics are heading. We're going to have a place where we don't have to necessarily worry about a school or a church building, shooting or, being targeted just because we actually believe in something higher than ourselves. Yeah. And so that, as far as the elections go, if we can get true conservatives back into power, and they can stand by what they believe in, I think, we'll be okay. We're going to obviously hit some tough roads financially, just because, what is it now, $1 trillion every 3 months or something
every
now?
100 days.
Or every month or something like that, yeah.
Every 100 days. It's
every 100 days. Up. Yeah.
The time is now going to get shorter.
And I mean, look at Germany, 1935, 36, something like that. The same situation was happening.
Yeah.
And what happened? Financial collapse. They had to blame the Jews, and boom, Holocaust, right? They were the minority. So I think financial hardships are coming up. And it's not even, something I wish. Obviously, I want this country to succeed because my children are here. We're the greatest country the world has ever seen.
Yeah.
But, we have to get...
But let's not let it fall to Babylon.
Huh?
Let's not let it fall to Babylon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just pray I pray for our country. I even pray for Biden that he can be wise. Yeah, we're supposed to pray for our leaders. And so I pray that we can get our head out of our butts. And here's the thing. I had an interesting conversation with somebody at work the other day, and we were talking very closely to what we're talking about. And he's like, I can't stand these politicians.
Yeah.
Yeah, but don't you realize that the politicians are a direct reflection of the people? Mm. Like, these people that are in power, it's us. It is a direct mirror reflection of who we are. I mean, think about it. If you were to say, what is the average politician like these days? Oh, they're corrupt, they're greedy, they're selfish, they only pursue what's in their best interests.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell about our society?
I know. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And so if we have and I pray that we can get back to God as a country, because if we get back to God as a country, we will be wise individuals who will elect wise individuals.
Yeah.
So that's if we want to fix our country, we have to, all of us who are God-fearing people need to go do the work of spreading the gospel, which is the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just believe in Christ, repent, right? It's more than that. The kingdom of God is the fruits of the Spirit. The kingdom of God is what were some things that we were talking to the kids the other day about the kingdom? It's help me out here. I'm drawing a blank now, but it's the fruits of the Spirit. It is the
Beatitudes.
The Beatitudes. It's Chronicles, Corinthians. What is love? Right? That's the kingdom of God. So if we act out the kingdom of God, we can draw people back to truth, and that truth will seed itself. It'll grow, and then we will bear up godly politicians that can represent us, the people. But in the meantime, what do you expect is going to happen when the very people that we are in power? I mean, it's destined to self-destruct.
Mm-hmm.
I was laughing earlier because we were teaching both of our children to memorize the Beatitudes just Friday. That's where it was. Matthew chapter 5, I believe. Yeah. That's where we're at. And so that's funny that you mentioned it, the timing, right?
Yeah.
'Cause we just spoke on it. Yeah. And I had Aaron let them listen more and more, so they can at least remember 3 of them.
Yeah.
So that's literally it, right? So we're teaching scripture every day at home, prepping them.
Yeah.
Our church, our group is
hide
awesome.
it in your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't
because
take that from you.
Yeah, because if you go to like parts of North India and stuff, Bible and stuff like that is illegal. So many countries. There's over 30 countries where it is flat out illegal to have a Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we may, and I hope it never comes to America. That would be one of those days of America. I really hope. But you never know which way some of these things are going to go.
Miracles can happen.
Yeah. And you know what? And I do remember, and this stuck with me. There's a guy who had been a missionary in, I don't remember which country. It might have been China. I'm not sure. But he had attended those underground churches. And some of the people were like, oh, pray for us. Pray that we will have the religious freedom that you have in America. And he said, I'm not going to pray that for you. Because you in this church have more faith than probably every Christian in America combined. Yeah. And I was like,
that's deep.
Yeah.
Whew. That is amazing because, the underground churches in Iran and China are the 2 countries it's growing exponentially, and that's where it is illegal.
Yeah.
A missionary goes from here. There's a true story of this lady's home. She has not seen the daylight for over 30 years.
Yeah.
Her father was persecuted for her faith, for their faith, and was killed by the government. She's been underground, haven't seen it. Some missionaries come in. So this missionary guy from Atlanta goes and hands her a bunch of cash, and she basically takes that and, please do not give it to me. That's not what I want.
Yeah.
I have not been able to read God's word. No one has brought that to me. That because no one can bring it.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, you cannot legally bring it.
Yeah. But I mean, you look at...
He was
sorry, go
able.
ahead.
Yeah, no, he was actually able to take one Bible, cut them into many pieces, and had other people mail it in different times, so she can assemble it together.
That's wonderful.
Is a way that she got it. So that this guy actually talks about for
praise
an hour
God.
of this experience that he had. This is a real thing that happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's the state of some of those things, you know. And foundation for us, what God has given us is family. Get them ready. And you know, that's literally it. That's what we're talking about, our two families. And
well, it's interesting you say that because I can't remember who I was talking to. Maybe it was Caleb. I'm not sure. Maybe it was you. But I said it is harder to be a parent today than any time in history.
In our American history.
In history, period.
yeah.
Because think about this. So culturally, it didn't matter whether you're Babylonian culture or Jewish culture, Chinese culture. It doesn't matter, right? You had a village that helped raise your children. Everything, there were foundational truths that even the pagans believed in.
Yeah.
Right? Family, work, right?
Yeah.
Like, but now we live in a culture where the family's been torn apart completely.
Yeah.
We live in a selfish culture that says it's all about what I want, right?
Instant gratification.
Instant gratification. And so, like, we can't, and unfortunately, I can't rely on my family because they're too much into the world.
Yeah.
So I cannot, in good conscience, allow them to help raise my family.
Yeah.
Right? And so the family, right? Now, like you go back just 150 years ago, 100 years ago, 75 years ago, it doesn't matter really, just really up until I would probably say in the last 30 years, you lived on a farm and you like what we were talking about in church today, it was normal for everybody to believe in God.
Yeah.
Right? So you had family, you had common belief in God. So there was a sense of community. We were designed by God to have community. We don't have that anymore. Okay, now let's throw in the technology.
Yeah.
Right? And the education that people are receiving. So now as a father in the 21st century, a Christian father, I have to know apologetics. I have to know science. I have to know my history. I have to know how to preach and lead and teach. I have to know how to play 3D chess, right? Because that's what the devil's doing, right? And so now I have to, as a father in a broken society, I have to be proactive in every area of my life.
Yeah.
For my children's benefit. Whereas you go back 50 years ago, you didn't have to worry about that. Your community believed everything that you believed in. You had a farm. You didn't have to rely on the government. You don't have you were able to be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And now everything is so reliant upon the government, and there is no community. There is no commonality between your neighbor. There is nothing in the education system that points to God at all. It's everything against God. So I literally have to be good at everything now.
Yeah.
Isn't that
in
ironic?
order to teach my children.
Yeah. I mean, it is ironic, isn't it, when they say that God does not exist? It's the same entity that they removed. If they're not threatened by non-existence of something,
Right.
Yes.
would you remove it?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So that's how. So everybody knows deep in their hearts, as God designed us, that entity does exist, right? That's how it goes. So, as we kind of wrap up, what are some of your goals in terms of, like, whether it's family, work, or what are you guys doing to prepare? I know we talked about foundationally scripture, teaching children. about community. For example, my specific questions in terms of getting somewhat involved in politics, abolition movement, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Because that's why we're involved, because even though we know the end will come, things that is predicted in many parts of the Bible will come, that doesn't negate our responsibility as
still have a
Christians
mission.
from
Right.
fighting for what is true,
Right.
and what is honorable, what is just, what is right, and so on and so forth. The framework of liberty.
Yeah.
Not just freedom, it's liberty. That's a big difference, and I'm still learning that. I'm learning from other people around me. So speak of that, and then we can wrap up.
Why don't
And
you go
then
ahead
Mike,
on
I
that?
don't know if you want to wrap up the whole thing, or if you want me to
Yeah, I
do
can
it.
wrap it up, but what do you
Okay.
want to speak
Well, I'll
about
give it
that?
5 minutes. My thoughts are that, generally speaking, the American church is just failing miserably, and I think that I think that would be a whole nother podcast that we could talk about that. But
Yeah.
that if we want to get back to the foundational values and rebuild the way our country, the values that our country was founded upon, and keeping God here, and retaining His blessings, and being even somewhat deserving of those blessings anymore, I see ministry in a completely different way than I think a lot of people do when they say, "I've been called to ministry."
It's
That
like, really?
automatically
Have you?
means I'm going to seminary and I'm going to be a preacher, right? Really? Like, everybody is supposed to be a preacher? We as Christians, we as believers are all called to ministry.
Yeah.
But what does that really look like? I feel like it's much more on an intimate and personal level. Wherever you are, whatever your job is, whoever you encounter, me at home, like whatever we're doing and whoever we're meeting on that particular day is your ministry, wherever you are.
To strangers, to Christian
Yes.
brothers and sisters, it doesn't matter.
And I think, I one of the things that I love about you, that keeps me falling in love with you over and over again, is that you do that. And our children see that. They see you stop on the side of the road to help somebody. And you talk about God when you do. And they see, or they hear about what they don't see. And no matter what job you've had opportunities to talk to people who are hurting. And you have stopped and prayed with cashiers at Walmart. 5 minute encounter. You've talked to Muslim women who are questioning and scared, and you may never see them again, but you do these things all the time. And so most of the time when you're late coming home from something, I'm like, well, he's probably stopped to talk to somebody, and that's what real ministry is to me. Not everybody needs to be behind the pulpit.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't encourage it because of the responsibility.
Exactly. And I feel like a lot of people really take it way too lightly. We know of how many thousands of people who stand up there who should not be up there. Yeah. There's no vetting process. Seminary is like...
It's a money thing now.
I feel like I have met more people who are far more qualified to speak wisdom and truth into a congregation who have been, were divorced earlier in their lives and
drug
learned
addicts, strippers.
Yes, like
you
people
name
in the
it.
past, like they have learned, they have experienced the grace and the forgiveness of God, but they're not qualified. It's just there's so much that we could talk about. Like I said, that would be a whole nother couple hours.
But that's kind of like why we're doing what we're going to do. So as far as like addressing the future, the plans is we are starting this church where,
and we say church loosely. No, it's not going to look like the other churches.
There's not going to be a pulpit.
We're talking about just a gathering.
No, we've
a gathering
actually
of believers.
We've been studying, or at least we've been investigating a lot of the traditional pre-silent years in Jewish culture, meaning from the last book of the Bible, or the Old Testament, to Matthew. there was a shift in the Jewish culture that actually is rooted in Hellenism. It's the Greco-Roman cultural belief system, right? They turned before, I should say, there was a shift in the thought process. It was God-centered, then it turned man-centered, right? And so that man-centered thought process actually made its inroads into the Jewish culture during those silent years. So, but if you explore pre-Greco-Roman influence, you actually get an idea of what the church should look like. Like, for example, there wasn't a pulpit. It was you had the Torah in the middle amongst the people. It was you.
If you read, I mean, as we've been talking about these things, I have tried to kind of erase all the things that I thought I knew and that we had been told and taught all these years. And I was like, all right. First, I'm going to go back to the ministry of Christ and his words and his example. And does he ever actually say that it has to look like this? And I'm shocked at how actually it's the opposite. And then you take that first and then read the context of the letters of Paul person. And the history and all of that stuff. And then you get a better picture of what it's really supposed to look like. And I feel like, in summary, the church as we know it in America is a business, which detracts from the faith that we have in the leadership of God and the Holy Spirit in that place. You know, and not to say that like these churches aren't good. Or that nothing good comes of them, or that everything they're doing is bad and
but
wrong.
I mean, look at the culture. The church has failed.
It's
Why?
A fine
because
line,
we've turned the church into a business. We've turned the church that looks like the world. I mean, I'm going to call them out, like Bethel. I mean, it's an entertainment. That's what it is. Then you have all these other false teachers out there that give you what you want to hear. The Joel Osteens and the what's her name? I don't even want to.
Joyce Meyer.
Thank you, Joyce Meyer. So like even like you guys understand, I didn't even have to say her name, right?
Yeah, we know the names.
And so our idea is that we're just going to get back to the roots. God, we're going to gather around the Word. There's not going to be a preacher. No, it's going to be the way it used to be, which was you had experienced elders.
People who've been through things.
And they would read the Word, and every week a different Jewish family would read. A different family would read. You'd have a representative from that family would read from the Torah that week. And then you would discuss the Torah, and you'd ask questions and get into the meats and it wasn't this production. Right? Yeah. And so then you have a community and you have these relationships that you can build. You can be open and honest, and there's no distance between you and the pastor. No, there is no pastor. There's a shepherd. There's a shepherd. Yes. The shepherd is the one that's simply like a husband. Would ensure that the direction of the church was heading in the right direction. But he wouldn't dictate, like, we're going to read...
It would be like...
Blah, 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 blah. It wasn't robotic.
Like, okay, now we're starting to stray here. Let's
bring it back in.
Let's, you know, and look at the scripture on this. And that's kind of what we have in mind in terms of like moving forward in ministry and in, trying to reach out from the more intimate methods of changing people's lives,
and we've already run
that
into
ripple
people
effect that it would have.
I mean, I think just speaking of the pandemic time when people weren't allowed to even go in most places, we still met for the most part. There were some gaps. There is a lot of people who are kind of disengaged from that, never been back to church for various reasons. Most of it had to do with the entertainment cutoff, and then there's struggling with all that and with the children now. So I think there's a lot of couples like our age, your age, and others with little children who want to have that friendship. Because you talked about isolation, apps and TikToks and the Instagrams, right? If you can have that gathering, it would be wonderful. I mean, I remember growing up in India, even though it was Catholic church, we used to have these gatherings in each of our homes. We would cook for like 20, 30 people. and they would come, and people would come and preach the word. I learned recently that one of the priests was so not Catholic in his preaching of the word. He brought people from the Protestant church in order to preach to us, and no one knew that.
Yeah.
They were not priests. And, speaking of seminaries and things like that, today, our pastor would say cemeteries, not seminaries. Because it goes to kill.
Yeah.
And not, and what kind of qualifications did Jesus require of the disciples?
Yes.
Obedience. That's the qualification. There we go.
Right.
Obedience
and faith.
Exactly. And then he says, go into the world and preach the gospel to everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? And Thomas comes to like 3-4 miles away from our house, preach the gospel to our elders.
Yes.
And they become Christians. What was that first century, 58 Christianity was like? What is that?
Yeah.
When do we get to go there? I'm just
Where
rhetorical.
is that? Like, everybody says they are the Acts Church.
Right.
Sorry, you are not.
No.
You are not. Have you read Acts? Have you looked at the ministry of Jesus?
So the epistles gives us the governance. Jesus shows the way. Epistles give the governance, and we hardly see any of that in action today.
Exactly. Yeah. But we think, we have these traditions. It's been this way for 2,000 years. I mean, it works. Well,
just because tradition's a tradition.
Man's tradition.
Yeah.
Jesus was adamantly against.
Yeah.
And so we really need to reevaluate which part of those traditions are pulling us away.
Yep.
Rather
taking
than,
away from God's design.
Yes.
He was making
like
sure
I said,
that they
not
were...
that it's all bad.
Yeah.
There are wonderful things that come out of churches.
Absolutely.
But
we've
also
had
some really
mighty
not
men
wonderful
come
things.
out of the American church. Mighty men who've been born out of the American church. So I'm not discounting that. But the fact is, it worked then.
Yeah.
Now it's not. So what is that response going to be?
And that doesn't mean adapt to the world to bring people in.
And that's why the church is failing even more.
Exactly. It means what were the intentions? What was the example he was trying to give us? And again, what have we done that has taken away from that? Are we following a man?
Yeah.
Is he exalted above us all?
Yeah.
Or are we following God?
Yeah.
Are we following Christ? That's something I don't think we ask ourselves as often
we just
as
assume that it's right because
it's how it's always been done.
It's always been that way,
And
again, Matthew chapter 4 and 5 go into those, and I think it's chapter 5. Jesus talks about we are the salt of the earth, and then he talks about being the light on the hilltop, right? And that's us. He literally calls us the light of the world.
Yes.
Jesus being the light.
The light giver.
And then he gives us that ability to go and shine on the hilltop.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, and if you think that the churches are doing that, no. Vast majority of the churches don't.
No.
And the seminaries are not really creating look at all the Ivy League colleges, right?
Right.
They were all meant to
the poison Ivy Leagues.
That's good. Yeah. They were all meant to send men and women to the world as missionaries. So look at how they turned out. Why? It got institutionalized, politicized, and the same thing is happening to our churches now. Same thing happened in Europe to the churches. Today, there are bars and
strip clubs
today.
Those former church buildings.
Yeah, the former church buildings. It's terrible. So that's not church. Church is us.
Right.
And so
it's not reliant on a building.
We can be inside a barn, out in the open.
Yep.
Exactly.
All of that. So I love that vision that you guys have. That's really cool.
And I think that's a great way to wrap things up.
Yeah.
So if anybody who is listening to this podcast, I'm sure Gijo is going to put some links in the descriptions that you can get a hold of him or us. We can put some contact information on there as well. Just reach out, if you're struggling to find a church in your area and you just want to be able to link up with somebody who you think is a true believer and you just need help, reach out. If you have questions about faith or you have any other struggles or need prayers, just reach out. And this podcast...
We may not have all the answers, but...
Yeah, and this podcast is designed for people like you, people who are just have questions. So please reach out. And
talk about it.
With that, we thank you for your time and thank you, Love, for being here today. And thank you, Gijo, for
thank you
hosting this. And you guys have a blessed and wonderful day.
And
take care.
Yeah.